Some people on X are saying that Mark Carney scratches his nose every single time he tells a lie. Let's find out if those people are right. So just a quick disclaimer before I get into this video. I am not a political strategist. I'm not here to comment on Mark Carney's government and their policies. I'm simply here to break down Mark Carney's behavior and body language. And before you get your panties in a knot, just know that I will also be covering Pierre Poilievre in the coming weeks. I kind of want to wait until Pierre has his by-election in August because I think there'll be some interesting footage around that. So just know that I'll be covering Pierre in the coming weeks, and I really want to stay focused on what we're seeing in terms of body language and behavior. Mark Carney has been a public figure for quite some time now, and there is a lot of content out there. He's done a lot of interviews. He's been in front of the camera for many years now. I even found some interview footage from over a decade ago. And it was really interesting to see some of the ways that he behaved and communicated back then versus how he communicates and behaves today. But first, I want to take a look at some of the footage I found of instances where Mark Carney is scratching his nose, because that's what people on X are saying. So let's take a look and see if those people are right.
Thank you, David, for having me. Evan, Ian, Jerry, the whole Eurasia group, BMO group, for setting this up. It's been an incredible day. There's seldom been something so rich in content. Now I'm going to bring it down.
So this first clip is from about a year ago. Carney is giving a keynote address with the Eurasia group, and we see two instances of facial touching in this moment. I want you to ask yourself, in this scenario, is Mark Carney telling a lie here? Or is it much more likely that the facial touching has to do with nervousness or stress? Is he lying when he acknowledges the other people in the room? Is he lying when he says, I'm going to kind of take the tone of this day down a little bit because I have some serious matter to report on?
Longest undefended border, celebrate our cultural exports, Bieber to Bertinsky. Sorry, I was stuck after Bieber. For my next B. And it's also customary to anticipate the return of the Stanley Cup to where it really belongs.
From my perspective, it's much more likely that Mark Carney uses facial touching or nose scratching as a way to adapt some nervous energy. It's a self-soothing gesture. Anything that involves touching the skin, self-touching, usually indicates a response to stress. And the reason why we do that is because it's a very soothing gesture, and physical touch actually releases oxytocin, which is a chemical related to reducing stress in the nervous system. You'll see this a lot actually with other people in your life, not just politicians, but people will often find ways to self-soothe because it feels good and it helps us adapt to nervous or stressful situations.
Because yes, the long-term stuff, you've got to fight pessimism, and that's sometimes like Bill Gates said, something like zero carbon in a decade is a fairy tale.
Yeah, well, I think what Bill Gates has done though on climate is he's very effectively divided up the solutions.
I watched a lot of footage, and these two interviews were the ones that I found where he did go to do some facial touching. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I don't believe any one gesture indicates deception or lying. You have to look beyond that. You have to look for clusters and groups of changes before you can make a definitive statement about what a person might be thinking or feeling. So when it comes to the behavior and body language of politicians, we have to take into account that they are media trained and that they often work with specialists who help them learn to use their body language and gestures to be more effective in communicating. So instead of looking for just one gesture that you think might indicate some kind of deception, I want to help you look for signs of stress, because I think it's actually much more beneficial, especially when it comes to people who have media training, to look for indicators of stress rather than just deception or what you think might be deception. So if somebody starts to show signs of stress or discomfort around a topic that they should feel comfortable talking about, then I think we can start to raise the red flags and say there might be something else there. There might be some deception there. There might be something that they're hiding or that they're not really wanting to talk about, and maybe we need to look into that further. And after watching so much of this footage, I've started to recognize what are Carney's signs of stress and what does Carney start to look like when he feels discomfort around an idea or around a situation taking place. So let's get into some of Carney's other interview footage, and we can take a look at some of the things that he does when he's starting to feel stress or discomfort.
Your current pay in sterling terms is around, total remuneration is around £1/3 isn't that right?
Yep. Yes.
And your total remuneration is going to be in excess of £800,000 in
Yes.
your new job, correct?
Yes.
That's a rather large rise, bearing in mind that there's a pay freeze on at the bank. I think that's the only point that seems relevant here.
Yeah, well, I'll just reiterate that my pay and pension, my pension's zero, but my pay and pension is equivalent to the pay and pension of the current governor.
So this clip is from 12 years ago when Mark Carney was stepping into the position of the governor of the Bank of England, and he's being questioned about his salary. Right away, we hear a vocal click.
Is that right?
It's when the tongue hits the roof of the mouth. Now, this can happen for a number of reasons. Often it's when we haven't spoken in a little while or the mouth is dry, the tongue hits the roof of the mouth, and Carney starts talking about his position. So he also leans in. This is something that he still does in present day. He often kind of leans in, and sometimes this can be done as a way of prompting the other person to clarify their point. You're kind of leaning in, asking for more information. Sometimes somebody will lean in so that their ear is actually closer to the mouth of the speaker. So this can also be used as a way to challenge the question or statement of the other individual. You lean your head forward and kind of tilt down as if to say, like, where are you going with this? So we see a little bit of that from Carney there.
Secondly, the housing allowance relates to the fact of that I'm moving, as I said, from one of the cheapest capitals to one of the most expensive capitals. It's a common, relatively common arrangement for senior executives. It was offered to me. I accepted.
One of the other things that Carney still does, unfortunately, is whenever he's feeling stressed, you will hear a huge spike in the amount of ums and ahs that he says. It's really surprising to me that in present day, given all his experience and the fact that he has so many resources at his disposal, he has people he can work with to help mitigate some of this. You will hear a huge increase in the amount of ums and ahs that he says. They're often used when somebody needs to buy a bit of time. We're all pretty guilty of using these. Millennials in particular say like a lot. It can just be a way for someone to gain a little bit more time to think about how they want to respond. So we do see that. The other thing that we see here is an increase in his blink rate. Now, this is not exclusive to Carney. Research suggests that an increase in blink rate relates to our fight or flight response. And that's because when our ancestors were under stress and in a potentially threatening situation, they would have to keep their eyes well lubricated. You wouldn't want the eyes to dry out if you had to be on high alert. So that's where that response comes from, and we see that here with him. There's a spike in his blink rate. So the only other thing I want to point out here is a little bit of contempt that I see on Carney's face, and this contempt comes around the idea of having to move, and we see that side of the mouth kind of come up. It's sort of a half smirk. And then we also see it again when he's speaking about it being a common arrangement. He says relatively common, and we see another gesture of contempt. We don't really see any signs of deception or any kind of deceit around this idea. Now we see that he obviously feels a bit contemptuous towards answering these questions, and that there's perhaps a bit of disdain around the conversation. Let's take a look at a recent video of Carney. This interview is from just a week or two ago at the Calgary Stampede. It's a little bit more casual.
Part of the conversation is about the amazing opportunities for Alberta today and for Canada today to build. And that's everything from building homes to building new pipelines. It's building carbon capture. It's building new forms of energy. Things seriously. And when people have problems, when people have concerns or grievances, I take them seriously and see which ways. I mean, my job is to help solve problems.
See what I mean about the ums and ahs? We just hope that maybe he'll eventually get past it and become a little more clear when he speaks. So when he says people have concerns or grievances, he turns to the other direction. We see a shoulder raise. That could be a little bit of uncertainty around that idea and whether or not he truly feels as though there is a concern, or if he truly feels like it is his responsibility. And when he says take them seriously, we do have a head shake no. He says take them seriously, head shake no. The shoulders go up and he has changed direction. So that is a little bit of a cluster there of gestures and change from Carney's baseline. It does throw up one little red flag for me. It's a cluster of change. We've seen a few things happen, and so we can ask ourselves, does he really feel that way? And if he does, why was there a sudden change from his baseline? The last clip I want to take a look at is Carney with Trump, and this is at the fairly recent G7 summit, and we're going to see Carney under real stress here.
Mr. President, welcome to Canada. Thank you very much. It's a great honor. Happy birthday. A few days short. A little bit. A few days short, but didn't have a chance to see you on the day. Happy birthday to the U.S. military as well, 250th, and this is the 50th birthday, if you will, of the G7. This marks the 50th birthday of the G7, and the G7 is nothing without U.S. leadership, and your personal leadership of the United States, many issues, geopolitics, economic, technology, and working hand in hand with the United States, Canada and the United States, and the other G7 partners with your leadership. Very much looking forward to the meeting and grateful to have you.
Thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate it.
So we have Carney addressing Trump here at the G7, and one of the things that I noticed initially is that Carney turns his body to face Trump, whereas Trump stays a little bit more centered and he faces outward to the entire room and the press. I don't think this is the best positioning for Carney to have taken, only because it makes him look even smaller. It also creates the perception of the little dog and big dog, where the little dog is kind of vying for the attention of the big dog, and the big dog is feeling a bit indifferent. Even though it would have been polite for Trump to perhaps turn a little bit more towards Carney, he faces outward and he projects bigger. Carney also places his hands behind his back. This is not a good move for him. His posture lowers, his posture changes, he looks smaller. The hands, when they're behind the back, we can't see them, and this creates a sense of mistrust because our ancestors always wanted to see the hands. We would know if somebody is concealing a weapon. So if we could see their hands and they would say hello, or their hands would be up, we would know that it was safe to approach them. So when Carney has his hands behind his back, it's not the most welcoming way to introduce Trump. I would say that it would have been better for him to speak with his hands out in front. Now, he does do this when he talks about global politics and the global market. We see him kind of gesture towards that big idea. So we do see his hands come out in front, but then they clasp down. And again, it kind of brings his shoulders down. It's just not the best stance for him. It makes him look smaller. It just makes the difference between their size look even greater.
Barack Obama and a person named Trudeau didn't want to have Russia in. And I would say that that was a mistake, because I think you wouldn't have a war right now if you had Russia in. And you wouldn't have a war right now if Trump were president 4 years ago. But
so we start to see some stress happening on Carney when Trump is bringing up the idea of the G8 going to the G7. We see a lot of mouth grooming happening with Carney, and this is also something that he does when he's under stress. He'll find a way to kind of toy and play with his mouth a little bit. His tongue will sort of poke around inside his mouth. He'll make some mouth grooming gestures, and this can just be a way to, again, adapt that nervous energy.
But we're going to see if we can get to the bottom of it today. I'm a tariff person. I've always been a tariff. It's simple, it's easy, it's precise, and it just goes very quickly. And I think Mark has a more complex idea, but also very good. So we're going to look at both, and we're going to see what we're going to come out with something, hopefully.
Do you think a deal is achievable within days, within weeks? Is there that kind of runway?
Now, Mark is almost so far away from Trump at one point. He's almost stepping out of the frame. He's essentially put more distance between the two of them. Now, the camera has punched in a little bit at one point here, but we've held this position and Carney is slowly moving away. So that is physically putting distance between him and Trump.
And you mentioned Putin. Do you think that he should have a seat at the G7 today, that it should be the G8?
I'm not saying he should at this point, because too much water's gone over the dam, maybe. But it was a big mistake. Obama didn't want him, and the head of your country, the proud head of your country, didn't want him. This was a big mistake. You wouldn't have that war. You know, you have your enemy at the table. Even, I don't even consider him, he wasn't really an enemy at that time. There was no concept. If I were president, this war would have never happened. But likewise, if he were a member of what was called the G8 at that time, it was always the G8, you wouldn't have a war right now.
Why not? What intelligence support are you providing Israel?
Now, we see a lot of the same thing happening here, a lot of gesture and stress happening around the mouth area. We also see more distancing and adaptive behaviors from Carney. He starts to fidget a little bit more. He's moving away from Trump. He's finding ways to adapt to an increasingly stressful conversation and situation. Now, the one thing that I'll say is that I do wish Carney would find the confidence to redirect the conversation. He kind of treads in this area of not wanting to interrupt. We want to see him speak up at that moment, but he can't seem to find the right time to interject.
Putin speaks to me. He doesn't speak to anybody else. He doesn't want to talk, because he was very insulted when he got thrown out of the G8. As I would be, as you would be, as anybody would be. He was very insulted. And, I mean, he was thrown out by Trudeau, who convinced one or two people, along with Obama. He was thrown out, and he's not a happy person about it, I can tell you that. He basically doesn't even speak to the people that threw him out, and I agree with him.
It's not a great position for Carney to be in. We'd like to see a leader take a stance. We know that, yes, Carney is a different PM than Trudeau, but they represent the same party. So it's bad sportsmanship if Carney says something negative or agrees with Trump on Trudeau, but it's an opportunity for him to change the conversation, to take control of the room, and he doesn't do it. So instead, we see the mouth kind of hang open a little bit on the idea of Trudeau and Obama. Like, ugh, I don't like that. It's a little bit of like disgust. Ugh.
You did a post last night where you said you want us to really target Democrats.
Yeah, I want them to focus on the cities, because the cities are where you really have what's called sanctuary cities, and that's where the people are. I look at New York, I look at Chicago. I mean, you got a really bad governor in Chicago and a bad mayor. but the governor's probably the worst in the country, Pritzker. But I look at how that city has been overrun by criminals, and New York and L.A. Look at L.A. L.A. Those people weren't from L.A. They weren't from California. Most of those people, many of those people, and that's the focus.
We can tell that he doesn't really feel comfortable with this conversation, and my best guess would be that the exit doors or the doors to the meeting room were over in the direction of Carney's left, because he's been eyeing that direction for a lot of this conversation. We see him looking over to the left more and more and trying to even move his body towards that direction, so much so that the camera actually had to pan at one point.
Of that, vast numbers of those people were murderers, killers, people from gangs, people from jails. They emptied their jails out into the U.S. Most of those people are in the cities, all blue cities, all Democrat-run cities, and they think they're going to use them to vote. It's not going to happen.
You said it would take 2 weeks to decide if
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to exercise my role, if you will, as G7 chair, since we have a few more minutes with the president and his team, and then we actually have to start the meeting.
So this last moment here, Carney makes a attempt to get control of the room, and we see some awkwardness with the hands. The hands come out and they go back in and then they come out again. He does all these weird movements with his hands. He puts them out and then he retracts them like it wasn't a good idea and claps them together. And it's just an awkward moment. I wish that we saw some more control from him in that situation. In the future, when you're watching Carney in a press conference or an interview, I want you to keep a few things in mind. There is no single gesture that Mark Carney does that indicates he is being deceptive. It just doesn't exist. You have to baseline somebody. You have to look at the greater context of the situation, and you have to look for clusters of change. You have to look for more than just one thing. So if you are looking for the signs that Carney is feeling stress or discomfort around a idea or conversation, then you will hear a huge increase in the amount of ums and ahs that he says. You will see mouth grooming happening. You'll also see him start to use his body in a way that adapts nervous energy. So he might start to self-soothe a little. He might put distance between him and the speaker. He might have an increase in blink rate. So keep those in mind in the future, and you'll have greater insight into how Carney really feels about a particular idea or conversation. So if you liked this video, please subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment below with some of the things you saw in Carney's body language and behavior. Just as a reminder, I will be breaking down Pierre Poilievre's body language and behavior in the future, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you guys on the next one.